So tell us about the conference that's coming up. It's May 17th. I want to make sure I get the title right. The International Food Addiction Consensus Conference.
Yes.
Is this, I know you've hosted other things in the past, but is this technically the very first one?
So it's technically the first sort of international one, if you like, where we've got all these amazing international speakers, a lot of them from the States, I have to say, and Vera's coming over from Canada. Yeah, so we've called it the International Food Addiction Consensus Conference because we'll be launching this consensus statement about food addiction, and that has truly been an international effort. Although, as I say, you know, a lot of the big speakers in this space are that you guys in the States are ahead of us, and that may be something to do with your food environment. I don't know. Possibly.
Possibly.
That's
great. Well, tell us about some of the speakers. Who's going to be speaking there?
Okay, so there's obviously the incredibly wonderful Robert Lustig, who's amazing. You know, just so well known for his advocacy of us recognizing the dangers of ultra processed foods and the addictive effects that they have. So we're totally thrilled to have his support. So he's really our keynote at the beginning. The other person we've got who's become very well known in the UK, Chris Van Tullochen. I don't know if you've seen his book, Ultra Processed People.
Really, really good book. I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah. And it's, you know, been very, very well received, that book, hasn't it, everywhere. And in fact, it was his. So he's got a twin brother called Zan Van Tullochen, and they do a lot of TV work in the UK. And it was Zan that we did the program with, The Truth About Carbs. And I think you can probably still find that on catch up somewhere, or it'll be on YouTube or something. So they're twin brothers, and it was Chris who was actually concerned about Zand and got interested in this idea of the addictive nature of ultra processed food because he was worried about his brother's health. But he seems to be going from strength to strength now. But it's Chris that's speaking, the author of the book, so he's coming. We've got Michael Moss, who wrote the book Hooked, and he's an investigative journalist who's really looked at the food industry and whether they know exactly what they're doing and what it is that they're doing to get us hooked to these foods. We've got Vera Tarman, who's host of Food Junkies podcast and really has a lot of experience in working with people with very severe food addiction problems, and she's talking about why abstinence is the treatment and why that's so important. We've got a guy called Dr. David Wiss, who's a really amazing guy, and in fact he'd be a great person to have on a podcast, I think. He helped us write up the first paper that we did on the food addiction study, and he's very knowledgeable about this overlap or interrelationship that you can get between food addiction and eating disorders, and how you work with that, how you tease out, you know, is the food addiction the primary problem, and then eating disorders have kind of followed on to control the food addiction problem, or is it, you know, is the eating disorder primary? And that's quite important for clinicians to understand, so because we don't want to be giving people the wrong advice for the condition that they have, basically. And Timothy Brewerton, again, he's from the States, and he's also talking about eating disorders. We've got Susan Pearce Thompson, who's from Bright Line Eating. I don't know if you've heard of. She's a kind of she's more on the sort of neuro side, but she has a program which is called Bright Line Eating, which a lot of people have found very helpful, which is basically this idea that you have these kind of you have these firm lines over which you don't cross in terms of your eating, what you're eating and your behavior around food. And she's been incredibly supportive of the whole process. Let me think. Am I forgetting anybody? I'm sure I am. Oh, Nicola Vina, who's very, very famous in terms of the again, the sort of neurological side of sugar addiction, and she's written the book Sugarless. and Erica Lafada, again, as he's a researcher from the States, and has done a lot of work with Ashley Gerhardt, who's the person who is behind the only validated measure of food addiction, which is the Yale Food Addiction Scale. So they both have worked on that, and she's also supporting the work to get food addiction recognized in the DSM in the States. So she'll be there as well. I think that's just about everybody. I'm sure I've probably forgotten somebody. They'll be offended.
It's an amazing lineup.
I apologize.
We
Yeah, it's a
apologize
really,
if we
really
forgot
good,
you.
really good lineup.
Wow, that's amazing.
So we're
And the cool
ramming it all into one day. It's all rammed into one day. So
got it. And
Anna
then the cool thing.
I've got Anna Lemke, who wrote Dopamine Nation. Have you read Dopamine Nation?
Oh,
It's
you know what? It's so funny. I started it a few years ago, and I got so depressed after like the third or fourth chapter. I stopped. I need to go back and listen to it again with fresh ears.
Yeah. Listen to it on Audible. Yeah, so she's speaking. She's actually zooming in from the States. She couldn't just make it, but she'll be speaking live online. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, what an amazing lineup. And the cool part about this is if somebody is not able to attend in person, they can also attend virtually. If people have the option to be in person, but they can also attend virtually as well.
Yeah, we'll be live streaming the event, and if you buy the ticket for that, even if it's not, in your time zone to watch it live, you'll get all the recordings, pretty sharpish after the event. And yeah, the live stream ticket, pretty reasonable price, I think. And I'm sure you'll post I'll send you the link so you can post that down below.
We'll post a link so anybody listening right now or watching could be able to see that and attend the conference. I think it's going to be wonderful. I thought the pricing was very, very fair. And I think for the resource you're going to get, it's absolutely worth it. If you notice the date, it's Friday, May 17th, which is right before the PHC UK conference, which is on the 18th and 19th. Also in London, probably not in exactly the same place, but that was an organization that you helped to found. How proud have you been of how that conference has grown over the years? Everybody was talking about how amazing last year's was, and it's just grown and grown.
It has. It's become really popular. So was it 9 or 10 years ago? I think, a group of interested doctors and healthcare professionals kind of got together and said, well, we need to kind of pull together. And I think there was maybe 50 of us in a small room in Birmingham the first year, something like that. And it's just grown. And again, I think because it's live stream now, people, international people can come, and we've been able to, thanks to a very generous benefactor, we've been able to sort of fly some amazing people in. So it's always fun to go and meet up with people from the international speaking circuit and see what the latest is. I think it was Ben Bickman last year was amazing. I mean, he's always an amazing speaker. I could listen to him all day, so it's always so good to hear him speak. Yeah.
So good. Yeah, I got to meet him for the first time at the conference that was just held by Dave Feldman in Las Vegas. I got to meet him for the first time. He's just down the road. He's like 30 minutes away from me down the road. We still hadn't met in person until I saw his presentation. For 45 minutes, the entire audience is just completely fixated on him. He does such a good job.
Yeah, it's just this kind of logical progression, isn't it? He's a very, very wonderful speaker. Yeah,
that's amazing.
David,
wow. Okay. Oh, good. Yeah. He'll do great. That's amazing. We already mentioned Dr. Sarah Hallberg's book that just came out. Unfortunately, Dr. Hallberg passed away 2 years ago of a fatal lung cancer, non-smoking lung cancer. The book is incredible. I have it right here. Status Quo Thinking is Harming Your Health, a Physician's Final Plea. Basically, it's written in the tone of like, if you're reading this, I'm not around. I got through, the introduction crying probably 3 or 4 times. I'm a few chapters in, and she tells a story in one of her chapters as she was practicing medicine that this woman had come in for, she wasn't feeling well, and they thought it was a urinary tract infection. It ended up being a lot more serious. But the bigger thing was her and her husband, especially this woman that's being treated, she kind of gave up. She didn't have any more fight left in her. And what kind of condition she could have had, whether she would have recovered or not in a few months, she ended up passing away that day. She had lost hope, and thus things escalated very, very quickly more so than I would have expected for what they were describing the problem to be. And she was gone that day. And Sarah explained how important that was to her to understand how important hope is. And even though she had been dealing with this fatal condition, she wanted to see her children grow up. She definitely got more time than they thought initially. Eventually, she didn't make it. But the power of hope. I can't bring you on the show and not discuss with you your focus on the power of hope. Why is it so important for people to feel that they have power, they are empowered, they can make good changes and deal with some of this stuff?
Yeah. I mean, this is what my doctorate was on, was the power of hope in healthcare, basically, and what a difference it makes when people can kind of see that they have some personal control over their future, and that there can be a good future, a better future. And even in these sort of desperately sad and even seemingly hopeless situations, how can somebody kind of say, well, even if, I mean, probably like Sarah did in a way, even if this is the situation I'm in, what are my best hopes for these next few years, and how can I make that happen? Is and how can healthcare professionals kind of facilitate that sort of thinking, really, through how they talk to people and the questions they ask and the way they sort of communicate. So my research was actually with people who were having lower limb amputations, and I was really interested in, I'd always been interested in, when I worked in big hospitals, you could have two people with exactly the same condition, whatever that might be, and in this case, basically they'd had a lower limb amputated, and one person would kind of adjust and adapt and cope really, really well and do all the rehab and kind of get back on with their lives, and seemingly have this really good quality of life and this sort of mental well-being. And then other people would really, really struggle, and they'd really be low in moods and not wanting to do things, and they'd feel disfigured by this leg, and it would kind of ruin their quality of life and their relationships. I was just really interested about what is it that makes that difference between the people that cope really well with these health challenges and people who don't cope so well. So we did a kind of 6-month follow-up of people who were having these lower limb amputations, and gave them like a million questionnaires to fill in. And it was this one thing that was this there was a there's a hope questionnaire, would you believe? And that was the thing that predicted down the line in 6 months who'd be doing well and who wouldn't be doing so well. And hope seems to be this thing which is about having a sense of what a better future is, and then also being able to see the steps to that future, and also having the motivation to take those steps. It seems to be those three components, having a goal, being able to see what's the next step towards that goal, and thirdly, do I believe in myself enough that I can take that step? But it's not necessarily a fixed thing, and we can, through our conversations with people, ask them to think about what might be better, or what the best hopes are, and to think about, well, what might be a tiny step in that direction, or what would it look like if I was a little bit nearer that goal. And also to encourage them to think about all the other things that they've achieved in the past, or their personal strengths, or what their friends would say about them, to sort of give them that sense again that they can do this thing. And all of this applies to the addiction work that I do, because people nearly always feel totally hopeless about ever being able to break out of it, or have a different future. But you can work with those kinds of questions to encourage people to think what it might be like if they can, if they could break free of this sugar addiction, and what might be one tiny step that they can take today. and all the difficult things that they've been able to do in the past, and bring all of that to this situation so that they don't feel as hopeless. And then with all the social support and everybody encouraging them, you usually get this lovely sense of momentum then when, we've just, so I was just saying, we've just done a retreat. Actually, I do some live retreats at Coombe Grove in the UK. And we just had our first online follow-up with that group. And it was, again, it's just lovely medicine, just hearing, that people are, 2 or 3 weeks in, and they haven't had any sugar and they feel amazing, and they can't believe how well they feel, and so therefore they're doing a little bit more exercise, and it becomes this sort of virtual cycle of them noticing benefits and other things coming out of that. So yeah, it's lovely.